Welcome to Lit Explorer channel. Today we are going to discuss Sonnet 29, written by William Shakespeare. First of all, let's talk something about the author. William Shakespeare was born on April 23rd, 1564, in Stratford-upon-Avon. He got educated at the Stratford Grammar School. He married Anne Hathaway in 1582, but unfortunately, the marriage was not a happy one. A few years later, Shakespeare left for London, probably as a member of a performing troupe. Very little is known about Shakespeare's hidden years, 1585 to 92. However, it is certain that he started writing plays at this point and also took a great interest in acting. It was during these years that he wrote two long poems, Venus and Adonis, and The Rape of Lucrece. His plays were performed by the Lord Chamberlain's Men, the company that later became the King's Men. Shakespeare came back to Stratford in 1610, but kept returning to London. He died in 1616 and was buried in the Holy Trinity Church. His wife died shortly after. Shakespeare wrote 37 plays, which can be divided broadly into four categories, i.e., tragedies, comedies, histories, and romances. His genius can be seen at its best in tragedies, like Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth. The comedies which have been appreciated the most are As You Like It and Twelfth Night. The two parts of Henry IV are considered the best of his history plays, and the most popular of the romances is The Tempest. An excellent dramatist, Shakespeare remains unparalleled in the history of English drama. Although he is better known as a playwright, Shakespeare also wrote 154 sonnets. The sonnet is a 14-line verse form that became very popular in the Elizabethan age. Shakespeare's sonnets deal mainly with the theme of love. In some sonnets, he addresses a fair youth, in others, a dark lady, and a rival poet. The identity of these three figures is still debated. He wrote them over a period of years, beginning in 1592. Some of them were circulated in manuscript form amongst his friends as early as 1598, and in 1599, two of them, A.I. Sonnet, No. 138 and 144, were published in The Passionate Pilgrim, a collection of verse by several authors. It is obvious from his plays and sonnets that Shakespeare was always connected with the royal court and favored by the nobility. The very fact that Shakespeare's plays and sonnets are being read to this day, and that their popularity has not diminished over a period of years, shows that they have timeless appeal. Even though Shakespeare has borrowed existing plots and literary forms, with his excellent craftsmanship, he has transformed them and practically made them his own. This is Sonnet 29. Let's read this sonnet first. After that, we will have line by line explanation of the sonnet. When, in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day, arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love, remembered such wealth, brings that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Let's talk about the sonnet now. As you know that we are going to discuss Sonnet 29 today. The sonnet begins on a pessimistic note. Now we will see line by line explanation of the sonnet. The first line is, when, in disgrace, with fortune and men's eyes. In this line, the poet feels that he is going through a phase of misfortune and is being treated as a social outcast. Here fortune stands for ill fortune or misfortune. I all alone beweep my outcast state. By this line we mean that it is generally assumed that when a person is in an unpleasant or unfortunate situation, society also distances itself from him. Thus the poet's misery is intensified, as he finds himself completely alone in his difficulties. However, the strong emotions expressed in the following lines suggest that these negative feelings are not unfamiliar to him. And trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries. In this line, the poet wants to say that he curses his fate and prays to God, but his prayers go unheard. Here, bootless cries mean fruitless prayers, and look upon myself and curse my fate. In this line, poet says that he looks at his life and curse the way it's turned out, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, completely disheartened by his situation. He wishes he could be more like other men, more hopeful, better looking, with plenty of friends, or having some special skill and more freedom. Desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. The poet wishes that he can have this man's skill and that one's range of skills, and even the things he loves best don't bring me any pleasure. Yet in these thoughts myself almost despising. The poet in this line says that whenever he thinks like this, he almost hates himself. The word despising here stands for hate. By the ninth line, we get the feeling that the poet is actually enjoying himself, wallowing in self-pity. It is not very clear as to the circumstances responsible for the poet's state of dejection. To understand this, we should know the scenario of that time. Let's try to understand it. There was an outbreak of plague in 1592, because of which the theaters had to be shut down, and Shakespeare might have been out of work. It is also possible that he may have given up theater entirely to work on his sonnets and narrative poems. Thus the plague and the resultant poverty may have been factors contributing to his dejection. According to other sources, Shakespeare's anguish may also have been caused by the dramatist Robert Greene, who made a scathing attack on him in his deathbed diary. Greene described Shakespeare as a pompous, scheming, vicious ingrate riding the coattails of better writers, and an insignificant jack of all trades. Shakespeare had acted in a play which Greene had himself written, but Greene's harsh criticism and the extent to which he insulted the poet must have been very upsetting for Shakespeare, as evident in the 8th line of the sonnet, with what I most enjoy, contented least. Haply I think on thee, and then my state. However, the sonnet ends on a happy note, because the poet thinks about his lady-love. He says that whenever he thinks about his lady-love, and then he feels, like to the lark at break of day arising. This line starts with a simile. This makes him happy as a lark. The poet makes his comparison with a bird here. He says whenever he thinks about his lady-love, and then he feels like a lark bird who sings the songs at the break of day. From sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. The bird sings the songs from this dull earth, and those words are like the religious songs played in front of the God. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. The poet says that the remembrance of her sweet love brings him such a wealth of happiness that he is not willing to exchange his state with any king. Here scorn stands for refuse. It is the time for conclusion now. Like many of Shakespeare's sonnets, Sonnet 29 is a love poem. It is also traditionally believed to have been written for a young man. Unlike some of Shakespeare's other love poems, however, which are concerned with physical beauty and erotic desire, Sonnet 29 is about the power of love to positively affect one's mindset, as the poem argues that love offers compensation for the injuries and setbacks one endures in life.